It's currently 10 p.m. on Saturday night, and I am 76 pages into Amusing Ourselves to Death. This is a really interesting and thought provoking book, especially for these times. This book was written in 1985, just when, kind of the show business and the news and the television was really starting to take over the collective consciousness and impact how people digested information, impact their attention spans. And this is a really profound commentary on that. Obviously, the internet wasn't really around in its full force back then. And, social media wasn't a thing. But still, the questions that Neil Postman asks and the insights that he provides are very profound. And he kind of, in the part I was just reading, he's going through the history of, okay, the written word was very precise, and that was how, when America was first founded, obviously people digested their information. It was a country of intellectuals. The presidential debate between Lincoln and his opponent, they would talk. Lincoln would go for 3 hours, his opponent would go for 3 hours, literally 3 hours straight of discussion. And the auditorium was packed full of people listening to very precise and detailed commentary on political issues. It's just, you can't even imagine that ever happening today, right? It's like, okay, you have a minute and a half to respond. Like, what is this absurdity? And, it's all based off appearance. It's all surface level bullshit, and so how far we've fallen from those days. But it was all because of, but it's not one dimensional either. Obviously, with the advent of each new media source, there were benefits and drawbacks that came along with it. I was just reading about the advent of photography and how images being everywhere, the kind of primary source of information started to be images instead of the written word. And the telegraph and the speed of communication kind of made it so that people would process along kind of like useless information that isn't relevant to somebody's life, right? And it's 100 times worse nowadays with just constantly being bombarded with information. But even back then, it was much more of a bombardment of information than it used to just be, okay, here's the written word, it's very precise, and this is going to be useful to your life, and this is going to be a thought provoking exercise of you sitting down and reading a book, right? Or reading something that was thoughtfully curated. But now we're living in the attention economy, and things are a lot different. I kind of lost the point I was going to get to there, but that's okay. I'm going to continue reading here. And it's a short book. I just got a late start today because I had some obligations, and I'm also a little fatigued with the reading. I'm feeling a little tired, but this book's only 163 pages long, so I got like 80-something pages, 86 pages. Should be able to do that in a couple hours and then head to bed. But actually, what I've decided is I want to give this book the time it deserves, and I want to actually practice this Hakomi method modality and, kind of really integrate what I'm reading. So I'm not going to read this one for this challenge. You know what? I'm happy with doing 5.5 books in 6 days. I'm not going to force myself to read. I just threw it over there, so I don't have it in my hands anymore. But I'm not going to force myself to read that book just for the sake, just for the hell of it, just because I said I was going to do this challenge. Like, I've progressed far enough into this challenge to know the way that I want to tackle reading moving forwards, and know that I can probably read like 3+ hours every day, no problem. But in that pursuit, take my time, take the time to journal, take the time to stop and integrate what I'm learning, because that's the whole point of reading these books. It's not just to speed through 7 books in a week. I kind of just wanted to do this whole thing to challenge myself and see what I'm capable of. And, I've realized I'm capable of probably reading more than I thought I would, or pushing past a lot of resistance that normally would stop me in the course of an average week. However, I'm not going to push myself to the brink of burnout every single day, and I'm not going to try and read through these books quicker just to say that I've read a certain amount of books, when the reason I'm doing this is to learn something and to fully integrate it into myself. So yeah, tomorrow I'll read Healing Developmental Trauma. On Monday, or sorry, tomorrow's Sunday. I'll read Healing Developmental Trauma tomorrow on Sunday, and then on Monday I'll do what I mentioned to you before, which is writing an essay comprising my thoughts of all these books. And actually on this one, I might just write like a whole newsletter for itself, because I have a lot of ideas I want to expound on, including how does the internet and video games and things of this nature tie into the insights of this book, kind of carrying that forward. And that's a very interesting topic that I want to explore and I have a lot of thoughts on. So stay tuned. If you're interested in seeing my writing, my Substack's in the description. You can check it out. It's just about midnight and I'm 135 pages into this book, and I'm gonna go ahead and just save the rest of this for tomorrow, so I gotta wake up early tomorrow. So the plan is to finish both of these books tomorrow, since this one I'm already halfway through. I'm gonna be pretty busy tomorrow as well, so hopefully I'll be able to do that, because this book is really dense. But worst case scenario, I'll finish this one on day 6. But I think I'll be able to do both of them tomorrow. As far as my thoughts go so far, the section I just read was mostly to do specifically with television. and how that kind of like has impacted the collective consciousness, but a lot of it applies to the internet as well. Just in terms of how everything's turned into entertainment. Politics has to be all about entertainment, even essentially. The debates have to be entertaining, the news has to be entertaining, teaching has to be entertaining. The way that television took over the culture made the whole culture like expect entertainment essentially, like, or else people weren't going to pay attention. So that kind of just like diminished the actual quality of all the discourse that was going on, and like made it so people can't take a lot of things seriously in some respect. And it's interesting to think about how that applies to the internet. I think in some ways there's a step forward. People will watch content like this on YouTube, there's a wide variety of things. It's not just entertainment, but at the same time, like, it's a question I'm gonna have to ask myself, because like to a certain extent everything is expected to be entertaining. If you're making a YouTube video, you want to engage the viewer to keep the watch time retention up, like all of this, the effect of this has bleeded over into the internet, into YouTube in specific as well. I think there's also like some benefits, definitely. Like YouTube's not as bad 100% as TV is, because like YouTube, you can pick and choose which creators you want to watch, like, and you can do that with the TV programs, but it's even more of a case that like, okay, like each 8 minutes within this TV program should be watchable in its own right, because what if somebody comes in the middle? So where I think there's room for a little bit more complexity and actual value on YouTube for sure. I've found value in certain creators that I've watched, whereas TV, you're really not going to get anything of value. It's purely entertainment. Even if it's something that's meant to be serious, the news, like the whole concept of news has been ruined. Before TV, you would actually get a coherent account of the facts of the situation and be able to form your own opinion. But when they give you a 30-second news clip and move on to the next thing, I think whoever's watching this video, you probably know this, right? Like, they're just constantly stimulating your attention. They're stimulating your attention and entertaining you with images. You're not really learning anything. In fact, you haven't learned the facts of the situation. You've been entertained. They displayed an image and they said some things which are meant to be entertaining, but like he goes into a study in this book of, I can't even remember the details of it, some news story, some big news story that happened. And then and so like, oh, this was all over the news. You think that Americans would be well educated about it since it's been all over the news, everybody's talking about it, and yet people don't know the basic details of the situation when they're asked, because all they were presented with is flashy images and like a narrative that was going to keep their attention before just moving right on to the next thing, and you're not expected to reflect on what's being said. So there you have it. Yeah, I'm just almost done with this. I got like 25 pages left. But I'm just really exhausted and I got to wake up tomorrow. I got a seminar at 10 a.m. So I will continue with the challenge tomorrow. And I'll give you an update once I finish this book, and then we'll move on to Healing Developmental Trauma, which is a really good book as well, but I'll talk about that when I get there, so see you in a second. All right, so I've now finished Amusing Ourselves to Death. However, it's been a full day since I've last seen you. All I was able to do yesterday is read these 25 pages or so, because there was a lot going on in my personal life. I actually broke up with my ex-girlfriend, so that was a lot to deal with emotionally, but I kept pushing, finished this book here, And the last like couple chapters that I read talked a lot about the impact of television and that type of media on education, and how essentially beyond just the sphere of television, you know, it kind of influenced all aspects of society, as I was talking about before, to where like education was expected to be entertaining. Essentially, everything was expected after television to be entertaining, or people weren't going to pay attention. I remember that even in school, you know, like teachers playing educational tapes in the classroom and just kind of checking out. And he makes a point, Postman, that that's a really ineffective form of education. Basically, it came about through people asking, what can we use TV for, rather than how can we be good educators. Um, so yeah, that's about it. There's some other implications as well, and like I said, I'm probably gonna write an essay exploring the implications about these insights, applying them to the internet and video games and things like that. But next, I've got Healing Developmental Trauma, and like I said, I'm already halfway through this book, but it's very dense, so it's still going to be a lot of reading. Um, what I'm going to do right now is just go on a walk and get some air, and I'll probably read some of this book while I'm there, and then I'll come back and finish it out. And at that point, I'll give you an update just to give you an overview of what I've read so far. Basically, this book is centered around the NARM approach, the neuroaffective relational model. And it's basically just a method of healing trauma that focuses a lot on just like being present with the client or with yourself in your experience, and kind of just like, honestly, I've already forgot some of this, but like there's various pillars. Like pillar one is clarifying the therapeutic contract. So like if you were to have a client, or even just for yourself, you can apply it to yourself as well. Like the first step essentially is to clarify what this person wants out of therapy or out of coaching, whatever it is. Like, okay, like asking the client, like, what are you hoping to get out of this session, like each time, so that you know you're not just like leading them down a track that doesn't even need to be considered. And it's also about like kind of like listening to the underlying emotions, the body language, to see like sometimes people will go into an issue where they're really going into that to avoid the underlying issue, right? Pillar two was asking exploratory questions. So that's kind of just like there's an example right here. Like the client says, it just feels bleak in my life, and like you still want to ask more questions, like what's the it that feels bleak? And the client said, I guess the it is my life. Do you have any other words to describe that? Like you want to ask more than just one question, like really drill down into what this person is going through, because you may not understand just off like a surface level answer. So you need to ask like more questions. And then let's see, pillar three was reinforcing agency. I really liked this one, where like it's basically just telling the person or telling yourself. I also kind of applied this to myself, that like we have agency in our lives. And like when we're traumatized, we may not recognize the level of agency we have to heal ourselves, to take action, and to live the exact type of life that we want to live. Then pillar four was reflecting psychobiological shifts, meaning that tell the client, you could like tell the client, or like even just tell yourself, like notice things in yourself that like, oh, I noticed I'm like a lot more confident and I'm taking better actions, and I've noticed you're taking better care of yourself and you're a lot more happy, right? Like just things like that. Or I noticed like your body language has improved. um yeah. Or even if it's like a bad thing, like, oh, I noticed when you brought that up, like your body like really tensed. Like, what is that about? And then yeah, those are the four pillars. And I'm now just kind of reading through. Oh yeah, there's a part on primary versus default emotions to where like there might be certain emotions that are primary that you go to, and then there's default. Um, Actually, I think the default ones are like the ones you just go to right away, and then the primary ones are like underlying that. For example, with like there's like sadness and grief, and some people, or is it anger and grief? Let's just say it's anger and grief. Some people will be really angry. That's what it is. And then underlying that anger is actually a deeper grief that they need to feel, but they're not willing to do it. And they go to anger, but they're not aware that underlying that is grief. And then there's some people will feel a lot of grief and sadness, but underlying that is actually anger, which is repressed, which they're not allowing themselves to feel. And then, yeah, we'll see what the rest of this book is about. And towards the end here, there's also just a lot of like examples between like therapist and client and like how that plays out in the actual session. And you know, I'm not a therapist. I'm more of like a coach or like a spiritual facilitator, but it's still definitely useful to know all this because it applies to any time that you're helping people. And I think this is a really useful like model and kind of way to think about things, especially with like they're clarifying the contract of like, okay, like if I'm working one-on-one with a person, like I actually want to know what this person in very clear terms wants to get out of this so I can facilitate that and not just like jump into like some random shit that doesn't apply. But anyways, I'm gonna go on a walk and get some air. I'm still obviously feeling a little tender because I just went through a breakup. But regardless, you know, just because we're going through something doesn't mean we can't continue to move our lives forward as well. So I'm gonna finish this challenge, and then that part about writing the essays isn't going to be a part of this video. If you want to see those, subscribe to my Substack. I'll probably write them like tomorrow or something and release them before this video comes out. But yeah, I'll see you when I continue reading this book.